I think that a lot of people think in astrology that your sun sign, because it's the most talked about, is the most important sign in your whole birth chart, and it's what best shows who you are. But I don't agree with that. And I think that your rising sign is actually one of the most important, if not the most important, placements that we have in our birth chart. And it can tell us so much about ourselves outside of just the placement, because it tells us so many great things. And I want to talk about that in today's video. To me, your rising sign is as important as it is because it pretty much lays out your life's path and the way you are because of the way it shapes your chart. I think it's also really important because it plays such a key role in knowing your own physical health. And I think it's really important because it shows you how others perceive you and how you come across in this life in a social setting. And I think that's really interesting. So I'm going to dig kind of into these reasons today, and we'll talk more about each of them and why I think that makes your rising sign so important. So if you don't know, your rising sign is the sign at which was on the eastern horizon line when you were born, at the exact moment that you were born. So if the sun was rising into Leo, you're a Leo rising. Capricorn, Capricorn rising. It's just whatever sign was on the east horizon line. That being said, your rising sign will always be the first house for you in astrology. So in Placidus, at least, your rising sign is going to determine the start of your first house, and because of that, it lays out the rest of your houses in doing so. So if you are Capricorn rising, your first house will be in Capricorn, your second will be Aquarius, your third will be Pisces, fourth, so on, so forth, whatever. I definitely skipped Sagittarius and that. You get what I mean. Essentially, this just completely changes the perspective in which you operate through the world. Because someone, yes, two people could have their sun and their moon in the first house, but the sign that the house is in is going to completely change how those planets are interpreted. And I think that's why it's so important, because a lot of people forget that, especially because if you don't know your birth time, then you can't know your rising sign. And there's a lot of key information that sits in the house system and what each sign your houses are in. So that's why I think the rising sign is so important to know. And personally, I will not do readings without them because it tells us so much about our lives. So if Capricorn rising is Capricorn is your first house, your fourth house would be Aries, your seventh house would be Cancer, so on and so forth. So it's literally setting the stage for the rest of your chart, and I think that's really cool. Second, I think your rising sign is so important because it's like the instinctual gut energy that you project into others' lives. So it's very much so that off the bat, immediate expressive energy. It's how you come off, it's how others see you, and I think we don't dig into that enough as compared to sun signs, because again, to me, a rising sign shows that instinctual, off the bat, off the cuff energy, and I think that is worth something. I literally just said something. I think that's worth something just because, I don't know, it captures that core feeling that you have and what's inside. And when you mix that in with sun sign astrology, you can really get a fuller view of who someone is as a person. For example, I am a Capricorn sun and a Capricorn rising, and I am so much of that, And the older I get, the more I feel like a Capricorn sun and a Capricorn rising, and I feel like that's such a Capricorn thing to say. But it's really true, I don't know. And I see others with certain sun signs and certain rising signs, and if they have a more sociable rising sign, it makes so much sense. Off the bat, you see that in them. But when you really get to know that person and they become more comfortable around you, it's almost like they turn into their sun sign over time, at least in my experiences, like paying attention to my own friends and how they operate. So I think that's really cool. Another reason I think it's important is because not only is it your core identity, but it's also determining of your chart ruler, which plays such a huge part in your identity as well. So your chart ruler is what planet rules your rising sign. Like I said, I'm a Capricorn rising, so Saturn is my chart ruler, and that means that I'm going to see a lot of Saturnian elements come to play during my life. And you'll probably notice the same depending on whatever planet is ruling your rising sign. I think that structure, balance, karma, all of those great elements have been such a big part of my life, and I've seen it revealed to me in so many different aspects that it just makes so much sense to have Saturn as my chart ruler. I also have my Capricorn sun with Saturn, and I have multiple Aquarius placements that have Saturn as a ruler as well. At least I consider Saturn the ruler of Aquarius. So yeah, I'm just very Saturnian ruled, and I can see that in my life in the way that I am as a person, and it's very interesting to me. Something to think about for sure. I definitely recommend figuring out what your chart ruler is, because it will tell you so much about your life, and probably some of the themes and lessons that you've learned throughout your life you might notice feel directly related to your chart ruler. So the last reason that I think your rising sign is as important as it is because, and I feel like this is kind of lesser known, maybe it isn't, I just don't see it talked about as much as I feel like I would, but your rising sign fully determines your physical body, your appearance, your physical health, which I guess appearance is talked about a lot, so I take that back, but again, it rolls over your entire body and the physicality of it. And I think that's really interesting, and it can tell us a lot about ourselves and our appearance, like I said, and that's something that you don't really get with a sun sign, as informative as a sun sign can be. That's why I think your rising sign is very unique and very telling, and why I think it's so important. So there's a lot that really truly goes into this, and I won't dive in too deep because I could literally spend forever going on about all the different signs and what they rule over as far as the body. But for example, Saturn, I believe, rules over the skeletal system. Virgo, I believe, has a lot to do with the gut. Taurus is ruled by Venus, and Venus rules over the throat, so Taurus risings can be prone to like thyroid or metabolism issues. Like I said, there's just so much that goes into the physical health that's determined by your rising sign that I think is so cool. Like, it's crazy that we're able to look and know all of that. This is also why medical astrology is a thing, because they're literally able to look at our birth charts and see what issues we might have or what physical things we could be prone to, which is pretty cool. I think that is everything I wanted to talk about in this video. Overall, I'm just really passionate about rising sign astrology and how much of our chart it lays out and all the different things it tells us. So I really hope that you guys got something from this video and learned something new, especially in comparison to the sun sign. So next time you're asking someone what their sign is, ask what their rising sign is. Compare the two. You might see some interesting things. I will be back so soon with another video, but until then, bye!